President Trump has made a shift rather on Ukraine, and he's made a statement claiming that Russia has been fighting a war for 3.5 years and that a real military power should have won in less than a week, which makes it a paper tiger, in his words. He noted that when the people of Moscow and other cities realize the collapse of Russia's economy, Ukraine will be able to restore the country to its original state and perhaps even go further. Trump states that Ukraine, with the help of European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of its land back. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has now responded to the US president's remark, brushing off his paper tiger jibe, saying that Trump is a businessman who is trying to force the world to buy American oil and gas at a higher price. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has asserted that Russia is maintaining its resilience and its macroeconomic stability, stating that Russia is by no means a tiger. Russia is traditionally seen as a bear. There is no such thing as paper bears. Russia is a real bear. Listen in. All right, Alison Butler, bringing you back into the conversation. Alison, I want to understand from your perspective, Donald Trump saying with the help of the European Union, Ukraine will be in a position to take back all of the lands that have been occupied as far as the current war is concerned. Is the European Union interested in extending that sort of help to Ukraine?
I think he's putting the European Union in a position where it sort of has to do that. I mean, when we talk about the European Union, he didn't mention it, but we have to remember that NATO has obliged its members now to spend a whopping 5% of its GDP on military spending. I think a few years ago they were asked to spend 2.5. So this is a huge increase. So it looks like Trump would sort of like to help Ukraine, but he wants the European Union to really shoulder it. Now, the European Union has the most to lose from the war in Ukraine because there's a lot of concern, particularly I live in Romania, but Poland as well, because of the proximity to the conflict and the proximity to Russia. So people living along the eastern flank of NATO, which happens to be also the eastern border of the European Union, are much more worried about the conflict spilling over than, say, in Portugal, France or Spain, because they're geographically much further away. But it seems to me that, as you said, earlier, that Trump is taking a jibe at Russia, and that is partly because he wants to, as I said before, he wants to be unpredictable. He wants to keep the Kremlin on its toes, and the Kremlin gave a response which is totally what you expect the Kremlin to do. They sort of make fun of him a bit and state that they're a bear and their economy is absolutely fine, and he's talking nonsense, etc., etc. But there is a truth in what he said, in that Russia thought it would take the territory it wanted on 2 or 3 days. And we're now more than 3 years into the conflict, and it's a very slow and a very heavy and extremely costly war for Ukraine, which is defending its territory, but also for Russia, where a huge amount, I mean, I don't want to make an estimate, but hundreds of thousands of Russian troops have died. Now, Putin has a huge advantage because it's a dictatorship, and he has this existential dream of recreating the Soviet Union. And a lot of the troops, what we hear, actually from the sort of poorer eastern provinces of Russia. So the losses aren't as obvious or as publicly known as they would be had the troops come from, say, Moscow or St. Petersburg. It's a strategic decision, almost a sacrifice. I mean, we could say to sacrifice these young lives fighting on the battlefield for a piece of land, which, as my colleague said, it just helps the arms industry. But by his statement, Trump is deliberately, not raising his fist, but showing, making a jibe at Moscow, but also calling on the European Union that they have to play a role in defending Ukraine. And as I said earlier, it looks like Trump now, he's given up his desire of ending the war in 24 hours or ending it in a few months. And it looks at this moment that he wants the war to continue.
All right, stay on with me.